I should have known the day was going to be a disaster when my morning coffee tried to kill me. To be fair, it wasn't exactly coffee. It was some off-brand synthetic stimulant from a sketchy vending machine in the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Bureau's break room. The machine was probably older than the concept of taxation and had been rattling ominously since I started working here. Today, when I pressed the button for Morning Turbo Blend, it let out a death rattle and spit out a cup filled with a bubbling tar-like substance that emitted faint green smoke. I stared at it. It stared back. Then it moved. I hurled it across the break room just as my boss, a multi-eyed bureaucrat named Grixil Varn, slithered in. "Dr. Laura Talbot," he chirped as my coffee splattered dramatically against the wall, sizzling and possibly developing sentience. "Excellent. You're just the human I was looking for." I tried to casually position myself between him and the crime scene that used to be my beverage. "Look, if this is about the coffee, I can explain it." "Oh, no time for that. I have a wonderful new mission for you," Grixel said, waving his datapad with the enthusiasm of a used spaceship salesman. I sighed. "Why do I feel like your definition of wonderful involves me nearly dying in a swamp again?" "Nonsense. This one's easy." He tapped his datapad. "The Bureau has received an urgent request to capture and relocate a rare, almost completely harmless species known as the Zorpian squabble. Our records indicate it is a small, docile creature that only eats sunlight and dreams, or something poetic like that. You just pop down, scoop it up and bring it back. Simple." "You know," I said, folding my arms, "the last time you sent me on an easy mission, I was nearly liquefied by a carnivorous fern that smelled like hot dog water." "Aha!" Grixel laughed nervously. "Yes, well, statistically speaking, your missions tend to involve more near-death experiences than average, but that just means you're lucky. Right? Right?" I narrowed my eyes. "What planet are we talking about?" He squinted at the screen. "Zangria 9, I groaned. "Zangria 9, the death jungle, the planet where plants have teeth and the local water source is classified as a controlled bioweapon?" He coughed. "Technically, yes, but the squabble lives in the non-murderous part of the jungle." I rubbed my temples. "There is no non-murderous part of that jungle. Look, the request came in directly from the esteemed Grand Vizier of the Zeltran Dominion, and you know how much paperwork those guys generate when we ignore them. You'll be back in time for next week's mandatory workplace wellness seminar. I hear it's about the power of positive screaming." I glared at him. "Grixil! Dr. Talbot!" He beamed. I took a slow breath. "Fine, but I'm bringing a gun this time." "Excellent. Oh, but, about that," Grixel said, hesitating. "The budget committee has made a few minor cutbacks, and unfortunately, your equipment requisition has been adjusted." I stared. "Adjusted?" He handed me a small battered net. It had one hole in it, but that hole was roughly the size of my entire torso. "Good luck," he chirped, slithering away before I could strangle him. 2 days later, I was on Zangria 9, hating everything. It was exactly as terrible as I remembered. The jungle was humid enough to drown in, smelled like mildew and bad decisions, and every plant looked like it wanted to murder me in a creative way. My official Bureau-issued gear consisted of a nearly useless net, a survival knife, and a multi-purpose scanner that, when powered on, immediately flashed a large red error message and shut itself down. So obviously, things were going great. Pushed through the underbrush, following a blinking dot on my backup tracker. Supposedly this squabble was somewhere nearby, quietly photosynthesizing or whatever. Then something growled behind me. I froze. The sound was low, guttural, and deeply unfriendly. Very slowly I turned. A 7-foot-tall, armor-plated lizard man was staring at me from the shadows, one clawed hand resting on the hilt of a massive energy rifle. His scales shimmered in the dim light, and he had the unmistakable expression of someone who had seen way too much nonsense in his life and was entirely out of patience for it. I had no idea who he was, but the presence of both the rifle and the deeply annoyed expression told me he was probably a bounty hunter. "Hi," I said cautiously. He squinted. "You're not the contractor." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The Zeltron Dominion put out a high-value capture request for the squabble," he said, voice like gravel. "But you're clearly not the professional they hired." I scoffed. "I'll have you know I am an official representative of the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Bureau." He gave me a slow, skeptical once-over. His gaze lingered on my tattered net. Coughed. "I had budget issues." The lizard man pinched the bridge of his snout. "Unbelievable. Look, buddy, I don't know who you are, but A high-pitched chittering noise interrupted me. We both turned. Perched on a tree branch was the squabble. It was not what I expected. I'd been told it was a fluffy little thing that resembled a sentient pillow. What I saw instead was a pulsating, amorphous blob with teeth, lots of teeth, and extra eyes, and possibly tentacles, although they kept flickering in and out of existence like they hadn't quite decided if they belonged in this dimension. "That," I said slowly, "does not look harmless." The lizard man muttered something unrepeatable. "The file said it mimics harmless things." "Oh, great," I winced. "So what are we looking at?" "Something very, very bad." The squabble made a sound, somewhere between a giggle and a chainsaw. Then it launched itself at us. I screamed. The lizard man fired, and the jungle exploded into chaos. I hit the ground hard, rolling through a thicket of what I desperately hoped weren't carnivorous ferns. My net, if you could even call it that, was already shredded. My scanner was still flashing the mocking red error screen, and my only defense against a possibly eldritch nightmare creature was a survival knife that looked like it came free, with a subscription to Space Ranger Monthly. Meanwhile, the 7-foot-tall lizard bounty hunter was faring slightly better. His rifle let out a deafening pulse as he unloaded shot after shot at the squabble, which responded by laughing. Not a normal, "Oh, this is amusing" kind of laugh, but the unholy sound of 1,000 ticked-off clowns being forced to file their taxes at gunpoint. It reverberated through the jungle, and somewhere in the distance, a tree simply gave up on life and collapsed. "What is wrong with that thing?" I shouted, crawling behind a boulder as the squabble flickered between solid and disturbing. "I don't know," the lizard man snapped, diving behind another tree as the thing sent out a ripple of energy that melted a nearby log. "The job file said it was an herbivore." "Herbivores don't usually have a kill count." The squabble's shape blurred momentarily, turning into a swirling mass of something that looked suspiciously like my student loan debt. I immediately felt an overwhelming sense of existential dread. I staggered back, heart hammering. "Okay, that's new," the lizard man cursed under his breath. "It's a fear-based predator. It shifts into whatever its prey fears most." "Oh, that's fantastic," I wheezed, trying very hard not to think about the time I was almost devoured by a sentient bureaucracy on a space station. "If this thing turns into my old tax auditor, I am legally obligated to die on the spot." The squabble quivered, flickering between shapes. An amorphous blob, a multi-limbed monstrosity, a looming spectre in an overdue balance uniform, before settling on a truly horrifying form, a human-sized cockroach with clown shoes. I gagged. "I take it back. Kill me now." The bounty hunter, to his credit, didn't even flinch. He just growled and adjusted his aim, firing another shot at the nightmare bug. The squabble let out a honking sound and leapt at us, and I did what any professional in my situation would. I grabbed the closest thing I could, which happened to be a large, vaguely toxic-looking rock, and threw it directly at the squabble's face. There was a squelch. The squabble let out an indignant screech, reeling backward, its form flickering wildly. The lizard man gave me an incredulous look. "Did you just throw a rock at it?" "Yes," I gasped, "and it worked." We both stared as the squabble jittered and screeched, looking less like an all-powerful terror and more like a malfunctioning screensaver. He narrowed his eyes. "You know what? We might be overthinking this." I blinked. "What?" "It feeds on fear." He stood up straighter, lowering his gun. "So what happens if we stop being afraid?" I stared at him, then at the writhing horror, then back at him. "Are you telling me," I said slowly, "that our grand master plan is to just bully the monster?" "It's worth a shot." I took a deep breath, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and squared my shoulders. "All right, let's traumatize an eldritch horror." The squabble let out another spine-chilling screech. I pointed at it. "Oh, wow, so scary. What are you going to do, send me an overdue bill? Please, I have already accepted financial ruin. Try harder." The squabble hesitated. The bounty hunter crossed his arms. "Pathetic. I've met bureaucrats more terrifying than you." The squabble let out a warbling snarl, its form flickering again, as if trying to find something scarier. I smirked. "You look like a rejected children's toy. I've seen scarier things in a discount bin." The bounty hunter grunted. "I once dated someone with worse commitment issues than you." The squabble vibrated violently, glitching in and out of focus, its body growing smaller. I jabbed a finger at it. "You're not even that original. You're just a bargain bin cosmic." "Horror!" There was a pause. And then, with a final defeated honk, the squabble imploded in on itself with the energy of a disappointed vacuum cleaner. Silence. A slight breeze rustled through the murder jungle. I slowly turned to the lizard man. He gave a small nod. "Well, that worked." I flopped onto the ground. "I hate my job." He holstered his rifle. "Understandable." A long beat of silence. "So," I muttered, staring up at the alien sky. "Who are you, exactly?" The lizard man exhaled through his nostrils, looking just as exhausted as I felt. "Korak Vex, bounty hunter, and you, Dr. Laura Talbot, zoologist, supposedly." His tail flicked. "You do this often?" I groaned. "You have no idea." He considered this for a moment, then gave me an almost amused look. "You want to split the bounty?" I blinked. "What bounty? That thing imploded. We have nothing to turn in." He smirked. "Oh, I wasn't talking about the squabble." I sat up slowly, feeling the pit of inevitable doom forming in my stomach. "Then what?" He reached into his gear pack and tossed me a second datapad. I caught it, squinted at the screen, and immediately choked on my own breath, because there, right on the bounty list, was my boss's name. "Wanted for intergalactic fraud," the listing read. I stared. I turned to Korak. I turned back to the listing. Then I laughed. "Let me guess," I said, grinning despite myself. "You up for a side job?" Korak bared his teeth in a sharp, predatory grin. "Oh," he said, "absolutely. The first mistake I made was assuming that hunting down my boss would be easier than hunting down an interdimensional nightmare creature. The second mistake was assuming Korak had anything remotely resembling a subtle approach to bounty hunting. By the time we reached the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Bureau's regional headquarters, a floating, moderately crumbling station in the middle of nowhere, I had already developed a migraine, a deep existential crisis, and a nagging concern that I had accidentally teamed up with a maniac. Korak's plan: walk in the front door, grab Grixilvan by whatever counted as a throat, and drag him out kicking and screaming. My plan? Literally anything else. "Okay," I whispered as we crouched behind a very sketchy-looking shuttle in the docking bay. "We need to be careful about this." Korak gave me a look. "Why?" "Because we work here. We can't just storm the place." He made a vague gesture at his very large gun. Sure we can. I rub my temples. No, we cannot, because, oh, I don't know, the second anyone sees you dragging our boss out in handcuffs, I'll be implicated immediately. And I don't know if you've noticed, but my job is already hanging on by the same thread as the Bureau's budget. Korak snorted. Your boss is wanted for fraud. You're fine. I'm never fine, I hissed. Do you know how much paperwork I already have to deal with? If I get arrested because of you, I'll be buried under so many forms. I'll die of bureaucratic suffocation. He tilted his head, considering. Then, with an exasperated grunt, he slung his rifle over his shoulder. Fine. We do it your way. What's the plan? I exhaled. Okay, we go in quietly. I find Grixil, you don't shoot anything, and then we get him out of here without causing a massive scene. He smirked. No explosions? I stared. Why would there be explosions? He shrugged. There are always explosions. I opened my mouth, closed it, and then pinched the bridge of my nose. No explosions. Korak sighed dramatically. Fine. No fun allowed. The inside of the bureau was as painfully mundane as ever. Beige walls, flickering lights, the faint smell of burnt coffee and broken dreams. We slipped in unnoticed, thanks to my security clearance and Korak's impressive ability to not look like a terrifying intergalactic bounty hunter when he put his mind to it. Instead of his usual full combat gear, he had thrown on a long coat, shoved his rifle into a bag, and adopted the vaguely irritated expression of a man who had been forced to attend an unnecessary work meeting. It was frankly disturbing how well he blended in. All right, I muttered, leading him down a hallway. Grixil's office is on the upper level. We just... Talbot! I flinched. A small, overly enthusiastic insectoid alien scuttled up to me, wearing the unmistakable uniform of a very underpaid junior bureaucrat. It was my co-worker, Dex, an excitable, antennae-wiggling paper pusher who had, for some reason, decided we were best friends. He beamed at me, mandibles clicking. Oh, wow, you're back. I thought you were still stuck in the field. Did you see my messages? I forced a smile. Yeah. Super busy. What's up? Dex's many eyes gleamed. Oh, not much. Just, an audit happening today. Pretty exciting. Huh? I froze. Audit? Yeah, some big-shot inspectors are here. Grixil's freaking out. Dex giggled. He's been in his office all morning trying to, fix some of the financial discrepancies. Korak and I exchanged a very loaded glance. Financial discrepancies. Translation. He's covering his tracks before someone catches him. I turned back to Dex, forcing an even wider smile. That's great. I should, check in on him. Boss stuff. Dex nodded eagerly. Oh, of course. He's probably still up there. I patted his shoulder. You're the best, Dex. Hey, if anyone asks, I was never here, okay? Dex blinked. Wait, what? Bye, Dex. I grabbed Korak by the arm and dragged him down the hall. We reached Grixil's office just in time to hear something crash violently inside. Korak gave me a smug look. Sounds like he's in trouble, I scowled. Shut up. We didn't knock. I threw the door open to find Grixil Varn, slimy, multi-eyed, panicking, frantically shoving stacks of documents into a shredder while also attempting to keep his computer screen from being visible to the two very unimpressed intergalactic revenue inspectors standing in the room. He froze. I crossed my arms. Hey, boss. Grixil made a sound like a deflating bagpipe. One of the inspectors, a sleek-looking reptilian alien in an aggressively professional suit, turned to me with a raised brow. Can we help you? I smiled pleasantly. Oh, don't mind me. Just dropping in on my dear boss here, making sure he's not breaking several intergalactic laws. Grixil let out a nervous laugh, glancing between me, the inspectors, and Korak, who was very unsubtly cracking his knuckles. Dr. Talbot, he wheezed. What a surprise! And, who is your very large friend? Korak grinned. Bounty hunter. Grixil blanched. The inspectors exchanged glances. Bounty hunter. Korak shrugged. Grixil Varn is wanted for financial fraud across several systems. I'm here to take him in." Grixil took a slow step back. "And now, let's not be hasty. I'm sure this is all just a big misunderstanding." I clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Oh, totally. But just in case, I think we should let him explain it in custody." Grixil let out a wheeze. The inspectors straightened. "Well," one of them said, pulling out a datapad, "if that's the case, we'll be taking him as well. The tax violations alone are enough to—" That's when the fire alarm went off. All of us turned. Grixil, despite looking like he was about to have a full nervous breakdown, took that exact moment to flip his desk over, scatter documents everywhere, and make a break for it. "Are you kidding me?" I yelled. Korak sighed. "Well, there go your no explosions plans." And then the hallway outside erupted into chaos. The hallway outside Grixil's office had immediately transformed into a war zone of pure, undiluted chaos. Fire alarms blared overhead. Emergency lights flickered wildly, casting everything in the kind of ominous red glow normally reserved for "you're about to die in space" situations. Employees were running in every direction, some screaming, some carrying armfuls of paperwork, like their lives depended on it. One guy was dramatically sobbing into a stapler. It was, in short, exactly what you'd expect from an intergalactic government office under an audit. Korak and I barely managed to dodge an intern wielding a coffee pot like a weapon as we sprinted after Grixil. "There!" Korak barked, pointing ahead. Grixil was scuttling at full speed down the hallway, his many slimy appendages flailing as he shoved an unfortunate mail clerk out of the way. His stubby little legs shouldn't have allowed him to move that fast, but desperation had apparently given him the power of a terrified octopus on roller skates. "Stop him!" I shouted, but this was the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Bureau, and nobody was about to risk their pension over an ethical dilemma. A security bot trundled into Grixil's path, its single eye blinking. "Halt! Please present identification." Grixil threw a chair at it. The bot let out an offended beep and spun wildly, skidding straight into a cluster of workstations. Korak growled. "I hate this guy. Join the club!" I yelled, dodging a flying desktop terminal as Grixil made an abrupt turn down the east wing. We burst into the next corridor just in time to see him slap the emergency override on the executive escape. Pod hatch, I skidded to a halt, gasping. "Oh, come on!" The doors whooshed open, and there, sitting very inconveniently inside the escape pod, was Dex, holding a smoothie. Dex blinked at Grixil, then at us, then back at Grixil. He said, antennae twitching. "Boss?" Grixil shoved him out of the seat. Dex hit the floor with a yelp, smoothie flying. "Hey!" Korak lunged forward just as the pod's thrusters roared to life. "Oh, hell no!" I grabbed the nearest thing, a datapad, and hurled it at the control panel. The screen sparked. The pod lurched violently sideways, bouncing off the launch track like an extremely expensive pinball machine before slamming back into the station wall with a spectacular crunch. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the escape pod's hatch popped open like a malfunctioning soda can. Grixil staggered out, looking approximately 30% concussed and 100% guilty. Korak cracked his knuckles. "I so hope you resist arrest." Grixil promptly fainted. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the Bureau's conference room, watching as a group of very displeased intergalactic revenue inspectors loaded a semi-conscious Grixil into a high-security transport unit. "You know he's going to scream about unfair treatment, right?" I muttered, sipping the truly terrible office coffee. One of the inspectors, a no-nonsense reptilian named Rylix, gave me a bored look. "Considering the 600 pages of financial violations we just found, he's welcome to try." I sighed. "So what happens to the Bureau?" "Temporary shutdown," Rylix said, scrolling through her datapad. "Most of the employees will be reassigned while we investigate. You're free to find work elsewhere." I blinked. Wait, I didn't do anything illegal, she smirked. Exactly, which means you're officially overqualified for this place. I groaned. Great, unemployed again. Korak, who had been leaning against the wall looking far too smug about all this, nudged my shoulder. Could always go into bounty hunting. I gave him an exhausted look. Why would I do that? He grinned. You already have the attitude. Opened my mouth, closed it, thought about my future, then thought about how much I really didn't want to go back to filling out zoning permits for alien ducks. You paying well? Korak's grin widened. Better than government. Work. I exhaled through my nose. Low bar. But then I thought about it. The running, the chaos, the adventure, and I realized something truly horrifying. I'd actually had fun. Fine, I muttered. But if I die, I'm haunting you. Korak clapped me on the back. That's the spirit. Dex peeked into the room, looking mildly traumatized but weirdly excited. Hey, he said, do you guys need, like, an assistant? Korak and I exchanged a glance. I smirked. Welcome to the team.